We just got done doing a nice panel about transits, and a panel discussion about transits on Kapil Raj's KRS Astrology channel. And I prepared a bunch of examples of transits, but I didn't get a chance to show them. So I'm going to make my video now to show them. They're going to illustrate the points that I made during the part that I did get to speak about. So here's the first example of a sudden loss of a job. Now, what you can see here is that Saturn, well, you can't really see it here, but you can trust me, or you can look up the date yourself and see that Saturn is stationing. That was one of the key points that I made, that stationing is so important when the planets go slow. Saturn is stationing on Ketu in the 10th house. Right. And during the panel, Dr. Arjun Pai had said that, brought up a naughty point that Saturn's transit of Ketu causes a problem with the job, a loss of job. This was a confirmation there. So Saturn stationing on Ketu in the 10th house, that's one thing. Now look, Ketu is on the ascendant. So that's another example that I talked about of multiple touches, multiple transits happening. Two important transits happening at once. Saturn is transiting Ketu, and Ketu is transiting the ascendant. So Ketu is really active. So it's a sudden event. Ketu is active twice, you see? Additionally, this station of Saturn is pretty strongly aspecting the ascendant. So this was a serious, significant transit, mostly focused in the 10th house on Ketu, that had support from Ketu over the ascendant and had a support of an aspect to the ascendant, and it caused this sudden, unexpected loss of a job. It also happened in the Rahu Sun Dasha. So because it happened in a Rahu Dasha, this is going to amplify the transits to the nodes. And Rahu Sun is already saying this is ripe for some sudden change in the career. Here's another example of a suicide attempt. In this transit, this happens during the Rahu Moon Dasha, so it's already set up to be a mentally disturbing time, just because of the Dasha, and the transit's going to bring this out. The first thing to look at is that Saturn has come to a station. You see how important the stations are? And this station is in very close or exact aspect to three key points, not just one. It's directly aspecting the moon, the ascendant, and the sun. All three. So the station at this degree is very dangerous for this person because they have their moon and sun and ascendant in that configuration where Saturn can hit them all when it gets here. And it gets here on this date in 1988 and stations there. It's very heavy. At the same time, Mars is also stationed and is stationed exactly on this person's debilitated Saturn. And from that point, it can also aspect the ascendant. So the ascendant is getting two super heavy transits from the two killer malefics, Saturn and Mars. Both of them are stationed. Both of them are aspecting the ascendant. In addition, Mars also aspects Ketu and Mercury. So very, very heavy transit. This is your example. How important stations are. And this is exemplifying what I'm talking about. How the chart has these natal points which are sensitive. And then the transits move around and they affect those points. Here's an example of the stock crash that happened in 9/11 in 2001. Stock market crash and how it very strongly affected this particular person. Didn't affect me, didn't affect many people, but it very strongly affected some people who have charts which have sensitive points in the same points that caused the stock, the attack or whatever it was. So in this September 11th incident, you have a Saturn station, and it's pretty closely an aspect of this person's natal Mars. Then you have a Mars station which is in a very strong aspect to the person's debilitated Saturn. So this is a double transit. See, Saturn is transiting Mars, Mars is transiting Saturn. That's one of the things I mentioned as a key thing to look for. And look at that. This is Joni Petrie brought this up. How you also have to look at how the planets are related to one another in the transiting space, how the transiting planets are related to one another. Look how K2 and Mars are related to one another. Mars is in exact conjunction with K2. So that's really a classic sign of some bad event. So from that association with K2, that Mars is aspecting this person's Saturn and an exact aspect to the person's ascendant. So this transit really strongly affected this person. And just to throw another nice cherry on top of this not so delicious cake, this all happens while Rahu is transiting the ascendant. So you have triple play, 3 huge events happening at once. Station Mars, station Saturn, and the Rahu. So the ascendant is getting Rahu and Mars at the same time. Here's another example. This is an example of a radical positive career change. Your eye may already be drawn to it. This happens in the Mercury-Jupiter dasha. Jupiter has stationed exactly on Ketu. So it's radical, sudden, but positive because it's Jupiter. And you may say, oh my God, Jupiter is debilitated, but it's also retrograde. Huh? So it's not acting so debilitated. Jupiter its station has just become retrograde exactly on this person's K2. So they have a very sudden positive event. From this position, it strongly aspects Venus, who is the 10th Lord, career, and Sun, who naturally represents career. So there's a very radical positive career change. At the same time, Saturn is also stationed in a position that this person is very sensitive to, because at that point where Saturn is stationed, it will aspect their natal Jupiter and their Sun. So in this case, the Sun and the 10th Lord basically are the focal point for the aspects from the transiting Saturn and Jupiter, both of which are stationed. This is heavy duty stuff. But in this case, it's really nice. And here's the last example that I'll show you. This is an example of a hospitalization for asthma. In this chart, you have Saturn stationing. Oh, I may not have done this presentation exactly right here. Saturn stations an exact aspect, or close to exact aspect, to the ascendant. So this is a stationary Saturn, and it's stationed on the ascendant. Mars is also transiting on the, oh, I'm sorry. See, these I didn't put this together right. But Saturn is stationed here and aspecting the ascendant, and it's also aspecting by its 10th aspect Mars in the person's 4th house, which is the sign for asthma. If you looked at my video on the breathing disorders, it's the 6th lord in the 4th house. Then at the same time, Mars is transiting the ascendant exactly, and this is all messed up, I'm really sorry, and also aspecting Mars. So this Mars here is the focal point for the aspect from the station Saturn and the Mars. And actually, she left the hospital when Mars pulled away from this station. Well, I'm not from a station, but when Mars pulled away from this exact aspect, when her natal Mars ceased to be receiving the combined aspects from the transiting Saturn and the transiting Mars, she left the hospital. So Joni was also mentioning this trigger transits happening within larger, more long-term transits. So here's a Saturn that's a very long-term transit affecting this 4th house with a bad health issue in it, the lungs having a bad health issue because it's aspecting by the 10th aspect. That's a long-term thing, but here comes Mars, which is not slowing down. It hasn't slowed down. It hasn't gone transit, but it's acting as a trigger. by hitting the ascendant, the focal point for the body, and also aspecting with its fourth aspect to that one Mars. But then once it pulled away from her ascendant and Mars, then she cleared up and she left the hospital. That's all. So I just wanted to add those in, and maybe I'll link to this video at the end when Kapil posts this. Thank you so much. Radhe Shyam. I got to figure out how to stop this recording.